Welcome back. Glad you could join us for episode 21 of the Kennedy Americans podcast. I'm your host, Lori Spencer. Please take a moment to like this video, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, join us on Rumble at rumble.com/Kennedy Americans. The Los Angeles DA has filed criminal charges against a man for stalking 2024 independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and breaking into his home twice. Kennedy said, quote, "He has written me 435 emails in a 3-month period, including one last week, which was about me getting a bullet in my brain." The DA filed charges on December 29th. In this video, I will break down for you the history of this very curious and interesting and kind of scary case. It all began back on October the 25th when a man was arrested after attempting to break into RFK Jr.'s home twice on the same day. His name is Jonathan Macht of Los Angeles, 28 years old. The charge was a misdemeanor. Bail was set at $30,000. The Los Angeles Police Department already had an emergency protective order against Jonathan Macht after the first time he scaled the fence at RFK's home. He was arrested that same day for violating the protective order the second time he returned and tried to break into Kennedy's property. Kennedy and his wife Cheryl Hines were both home when the attempted break-ins occurred. Jonathan Macht is out on bond. He was released after a short stay of 24 hours in jail. He was released on October 26th. So who is Jonathan Macht? He is a real estate agent, and apparently a pretty successful one, in Pacific Palisades, California. From his own biography, Jonathan Macht seems to be a political animal, having graduated with honors from Tulane University in New Orleans with a degree in political science and a minor in Latin American studies. If you're a student of the JFK assassination conspiracy, you might find that part interesting. He grew up in Pacific Palisades in San Francisco. He's also certified in real estate financial management, as well as real estate development through UCLA's extension program. His real estate license is active and in good standing with the state of California, with no past disciplinary actions. According to the Los Angeles Police Department, the first time Jonathan Macht scaled Kennedy's fence was around 9:30 in the morning on October 25th. Police took him in on a suspicion of trespassing complaint. After the initial trespass on Kennedy's property, an emergency protective order against Macht was issued by the police. Jonathan Macht was released from police custody that same day and at around 5:45 p.m. was detained by Bobby Kennedy's private security outside his house again, trying to scale the fence. Police arrested him again around 6:10 p.m. for violating the emergency protective order. Gavin DeBecker and Associates, the private security firm employed by Mr. Kennedy, has informed the Secret Service about, quote, this specific obsessed individual several times in recent months and shared alarming communications he has sent to the candidate. According to a protective risk assessment document prepared by the U.S. Secret Service and obtained by Judicial Watch, the Secret Service knows exactly who Jonathan Macht is and has known for several months. Yet, they take no action. The feds had a similar lack of interest in Adrian Paul Aspiro, the armed man arrested at RFK's September 15th event in Los Angeles. Even though Adrian Aspiro was impersonating a federal officer, he has not been charged with any federal crimes. I've been covering his case as well in the Los Angeles courts, and I will pop a link in the description of this video to my coverage of the Aspiro case if you'd like to take a look at that. In a 5-page letter to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, the Robert F. Kennedy campaign described Jonathan Macht as having an obsession with RFK Jr. that leads him to be, at times, hostile and angry, saying, quote, Secret Service is aware that he has sent hundreds of emails to the candidate and believes he is being followed by people who intend to kill him. This is Kennedy Jr.'s third formal request for Secret Service protection. The October 25th letter says, quote, "The intruder is currently in LAPD custody, but will likely have been released by the time you receive this." Indeed, Jonathan Macht was released the next day, October 26th, and is back on the street. The letter goes on to say, quote, "This will mean 3 people, all of whom have made dangerous approaches to the candidate and all known to the Secret Service, will be at large and able to continue their efforts to encounter the candidate." The Kennedy campaign's letter to DHS also makes reference to the recent assassination of presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio in Ecuador, calling it, quote, "an event that tends to elevate risk for all political figures because widely publicized acts of violence tend to cluster." During that assassination, 9 other people were injured, including 2 police officers. As the Kennedy campaign wrote to the DHS, Gavin DeBecker affirmed in his declaration to your office nearly all attacks on American politicians caused injury to bystanders, stressing in bold that members of the public and others in the vicinity of the candidate are also at increased risk of being injured or killed in the absence of Secret Service protection. The letter to DHS by Matthew Sanders of Team Kennedy concludes with, quote, "Every administration for 55 years afforded early Secret Service protection to candidates who requested it. Your refusal is the sole outlier, making the Biden administration the only one to refuse a protection request. This is an urgent matter, and we request an expedited response." The president himself can grant Secret Service protection to anyone, for any reason, at any time. President Biden could literally grant Secret Service protection to his dog trainer with the stroke of a pen. Why won't he do that for his old family friend, Bobby Kennedy? Digging into Jonathan Macht's background a bit, I found a petition that he sent to former Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal and Representative Steve Scalise in 2015 called "End Campus Shootings." This was before Representative Steve Scalise himself was shot by a crazed gunman at a baseball game in Washington, D.C. back in 2017. In November of 2015, Jonathan Macht gave an interview to the Tulane Hullabaloo campus newspaper, a story about active shooters on college campuses, a subject he seemed quite obsessed with. Macht said, "My reaction to it was that it is a sensitive issue, but at the same time, when are we going to have this conversation? Because I'd rather know what to do than to completely ignore it altogether." The article says, in part due to his dissatisfaction with many students' lack of awareness, Jonathan Macht started an online petition for the improved education of university procedures and drills surrounding active shooter procedures, in addition to broader state legislative measures. He said, quote, "I myself did not know we had one until I Googled it and it was on the school's website," Macht said. "The fact that this has to be done, I think, is just ridiculous. More than anything, the petition is to raise awareness on the issue of campus shootings." Jonathan Macht's grandmother, Margot Hastings, was quite a well-connected person in government affairs and the military. She and Jonathan were apparently very close. Her obituary said that Margot would tell you her greatest achievements were her daughter, a writer and attorney, and her grandson, Jonathan. She was never prouder than the day she saw him graduate from Tulane University in 2017, and says that she loved arguing politics with her son-in-law and grandson. After graduating from Tulane, Jonathan Macht moved back to his home state of California, finished his schooling at UCLA, got his realtor's license, and went to work in Coldwell Banker Realty's Pacific Palisades office. Here is a brief video showing Jonathan being honored by his co-workers at the office back in 2020.
Pacific Palisades office of Coldwell Banker Global Luxury. We're here with the number 2 agent in the Pacific Palisades office for this month. So I'd like to welcome John Macht from our Coldwell Banker Pacific Palisades office. He is incredible at what he does, and he's number 2 in the office this month. So look, I'm standing here with him. I'm in awe. And next to him is his manager, Ann Russell, who apparently is a little bit part of this success. So I'm going to ask John, talk to us about your business and why are you such a success?
Well, the biggest reason is because of Ann. Ann has helped mentor me. Ann has provided incredible guidance, and I'm only 24 years old, and I've learned that you need to rely on folks who are established in the business, who can provide that guidance, who have that experience. Ann has been incredibly helpful in negotiations. She helped me negotiate my first deal. She's helped me with paperwork. And then I've also, seen some success just based on really sort of my belief in wanting to be successful more than anything. Having a certain goal in mind financially, and also to help my family, frankly, some personal goals, and that sort of motivation has driven me to do really whatever is needed to be successful. That's knocking on hundreds of doors a day, which I literally did in my first few months in the business, in the sun, it's 80 degrees, walking around in a jacket, sending out hundreds of direct mail letters, and a lot of people have no interest in door knocking, but frankly, it works if you know how to properly qualify clients or prospects, and if you have the willingness to genuinely want to help other people. That's the biggest thing I've also found. When you go and door knock, people will want to listen to you if you genuinely want to help them. And we are in the business of helping and servicing others, and that is what people want to hear. That's what people believe in our business. So
that's what you shared with me earlier about how you really help your clients, and you're out there door knocking, but the reason why it's working so well is because you're actually out there to try and help them. It's not so much about you getting the transaction, it's about helping them move to the next level in their life and where they're trying to go. So what do you think resonates the most when you talk to somebody and you go to the door and you're just there to help them? What are you providing them?
Sure. Well, honestly, I just have a genuine conversation with them. I build rapport, I talk to them about their lives, I talk to them about the neighborhood. And every time I have a really good conversation with someone, I write them a handwritten thank you card. And I'll send 15 to 20 of those every day if I'm consistent with it. And, it's doing the little things, keeping in touch with them. Even just on my most recent sale, I drove one of the family members to have her belongings, taken to Goodwill. I mean, doing little things that don't necessarily benefit you in that short-term moment, but help you in the long run and help your client. That's what we're in the business to do, and a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people are just interested in helping themselves, and those are not the folks who are successful in this business. And I've learned from folks like Ann that to truly be successful in this business is helping others.
So Ann, what do you think makes the difference in this young man's life that he's already so successful in a luxury global market like Pacific Palisades? What you work with him every day, what do you think?
He works hard. He is the first person in this office in the morning. When I walk in, he's already sitting right there, working, writing his thank you notes, sending out notes, putting together flyers. You're always working, and he literally takes this as a job all day long and doesn't give up. Works from very early in the morning till very late at night every single day.
Yeah, and I have a certain goal in my mind, and when it's not just a financial goal, when there's extra emotional motivation to your goal, you will have the ambition and drive to want to accomplish that goal. There won't be anything that gets in your way. There really will not be. You will have tunnel vision, and for a while I've had tunnel vision, and sometimes it can take months. It took me 8 months until I had my first sale, but I just sold my first house, and I have 2 more listings now.
That's right.
So you just have to stick with the process, and you have to have a meaningful goal for you. And that will help you in the dog days. That's dog days of summer when you're knocking on doors, when you have that extra motivation.
But you talk about that meaningful reason why you're doing it. It's that why. You have to find that, and that's what sounds like what drives you.
I do, yeah, and it's,
Tell Jamie what your why is for your family.
Okay, sure. So I would like to buy my grandmother, who lives in Pennsylvania, a home here in California. And she's had cancer several different times in her life. And I talked to her about this at Christmas. I said, my Christmas gift to you might come a little bit later this year, but I'd like to help pay the down payment on a home in Northern California, which is where my parents live. And, she started to cry. And so for me, internally, I knew I have that extra motivation to be successful. I know that when I'm in a negotiation on the phone, I have that extra why I want to be successful. It's not just for making the money for myself, it's to help members of my family. So everyone can have a why, a big why. Everyone has something. It just depends on what your why is going to be.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing today. I would just say, would you like any referrals out there from TV Land?
I would love referrals,
So
more than anything.
Talk to us about what you cover. What area do you cover?
Sure, I cover West Los Angeles. I grew up part of my life here in the Palisades, so predominantly the Palisades. However, if you have interest in buying an income property or you're a developer interested in finding a fixer-upper, I do have my finger on the pulse in quite large swaths of West LA. I know West LA very, very well, and so yeah, get in touch with me if you have any questions, and if there's anything I can do really just to help you in general.
So we'll go ahead and tag him in this post, and you can find him. And why don't you shoot out your phone number to everybody?
Yeah, that would be great. So I actually have a San Francisco phone number. It differentiates me, 415-710-9667.
Good, and it sounds like you might have to sell somebody's house in Pennsylvania, maybe, so you might need a referral in
Well,
Pennsylvania.
yeah, we do have a Coldwell Banker agent actually in Pennsylvania who I've already been in touch with.
That's
So
Way to go. All right.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing today. And if you need anything in the Palisades, Anne's here to help you out, and she'll hook you up with our agents here. And we just want to thank you for using Coldwell Banker Global Luxury. Have a great day.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Yay.
Shortly before his troubles with RFK began, Jonathan Macht, in the spring of 2023, was sued for contract fraud in a Coldwell Banker real estate deal. That case is still ongoing. The plaintiffs, Virginia Rockwell and Daniel McCallum, sued for breach of contract, breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, fraudulent intentional misrepresentation, and fraudulent concealment, the lawsuit alleged. It was around that same time that Jonathan Macht apparently began to become obsessed with Mr. Kennedy and began stalking him. Kennedy tells Dave Rubin in this interview that Jonathan Macht has written him more than 400 menacing emails over a period of several months, including a threat to put a bullet in his head, shortly before Jonathan Macht invaded his property twice in one day. Take a look.
And I thought we'd start with something a little bizarre, because obviously there's plenty to talk about, and the world seems to be in a bit of a chaotic place. But on the way here, as I was in the car, I looked at your Twitter, and I want to read your last tweet, because I think this encapsulates a lot of people's frustrations with what's going on here in California. You wrote, "Yesterday, an intruder climbed the fence at my home and was arrested. After being released from police custody later in the day, he immediately returned to my home and was arrested again." So twice in one day at your house, you mentioned that your wife Cheryl was doing a Facebook live stream at that moment. Is that a perfect example of the frustrations that people are having in this town, in this state, and really across the country at this point?
Yeah, I was, because you were with me a few minutes ago when I learned that was up on my Twitter, and I didn't really want to put it up on my Twitter because I didn't want to seem like I was whining, but my wife saw him come over the fence when she was doing a Twitter space Facebook Live, or Instagram Live. And then she saw these wonderful guys from Gavin de Becker, the security guys, with their guns drawn, chasing him and putting handcuffs on him. But he was an intruder who had written me over 400 emails over the recent months, including many menacing ones. A week ago, one that threatened to put a bullet in my head, and so it's one of several incidences that have happened recently, including a guy who showed up in LA at a theater in Wilshire when I was doing a rally and asked for me, and he was wearing a U.S. Marshal badge, a lanyard badge, and a federal ID, and these guys spotted him because they thought the badge was too shiny, and he asked to see me, and they pulled him aside. He had 2 shoulder holsters on that were fully loaded with each one with the magazines loaded with 8 bullets. he had a backpack on with another gun in it loaded, and he had, I think, 4 or 5 extra magazines and knives and other weapons in there. And his house later on was filled with rifles. And he had given created a TikTok that said, if I don't come back from this, contact your commander-in-chief, etc. So it was, we've repeatedly asked the Biden administration for Secret Service protection. I'm the only candidate in history who has asked for a presidential candidate who has requested Secret Service protection and been denied. Most people they legally have to give it to you 120 days out, but customarily is given. My uncle got it 500 days out, Teddy Kennedy. They made Secret Service available to candidates during the primaries after my father was killed. And ever since then, people are just pro forma given. I think Obama got it 500 days out. I'm now 365 days out. So many candidates have gotten it much earlier than me. It's disturbing to me because I'm watching the politicization of the other law enforcement agencies. And when my father got into the Justice Department, the first day in the Justice Department, he called all the attorneys together, and the one thing he said to them is, we are not going to politicize justice in this country. And during my tenure at this agency, that there's going to be no politicization. Democrats and Republicans are going to be treated the same. And he gave that as an ironclad order. President Biden has a statue of my father behind him in the Oval Office, but his family members get Secret Service protection. Anthony Fauci has $1 million of Secret Service protection a month. People don't like him, so he's entitled to it. John Bolton, years after retiring, has Secret Service protection, as do many other officials. And it's politicization. I imagine, I don't know why they're doing it exactly, but I think that they understand it's very, very expensive for me, and that they'd rather me be spending money on my protection rather than, on advertisements or organization or field organization.
One wonders what motivates a successful, educated man like Jonathan Macht, who holds a degree in political science, to write 400 emails to RFK Jr., and what the content of those emails was. What exactly is Macht so upset about? Kennedy's campaign is keeping that under wraps. On December 28th, the Los Angeles DA filed criminal charges against Jonathan Macht, alleging that he disobeyed a restraining order, also charged him with trespassing and harassment through repeated phone calls. His arraignment and plea hearing is coming up this month, January 29th. I'll be covering that. Interestingly, the following day, on December 29th, Jonathan Macht filed a petition for a legal name change, citing as the reason no connection to father. He is asking the court to change his name to Jonathan Stanley Jonas. Back on November 6, 2023, RFK Jr. filed a civil harassment petition against Jonathan Macht, stating that Macht trespassed on his residence twice on October 25th, sent harassing letters to Kennedy's home, and 439 emails to be exact. RFK stated that Macht intended to get a gun. The court gave RFK Jr. a permanent restraining order against Jonathan Macht. The order specifies that Jonathan Macht cannot own, possess, buy, or try to buy firearms, guns, firearm parts, or ammunition. He can have no contact with RFK or his family. The restraining order is good for 5 years. Additionally, the court order stipulates that Jonathan Macht cannot come within 100 feet of Mr. Kennedy, his family members, his home, his place of work, or his vehicles. Further, Jonathan Macht cannot, quote, take any action to obtain Kennedy's address or location. The order was consented to by Jonathan Macht through his lawyer. Unfortunately, a restraining order only offers limited protection to Bobby Kennedy, and Jonathan Macht has shown in the past that he doesn't have any regard for court orders. Jonathan Macht already had a temporary restraining order against him once and ignored it when he returned to scale RFK's fence. There's also the pending case of Adrian Paul Aspiro, who's back in court this month, the heavily armed man who was arrested at an RFK Jr. campaign event back in September, which I've also been covering as it moves through the courts. RFK also has a current restraining order against Adrian Aspiro. The Department of Homeland Security is still denying Kennedy's repeated requests for Secret Service protection, even though he meets every benchmark to qualify. RFK is the only presidential candidate in history to be denied a Secret Service detail. He is asked 3 times. President Biden can override the DHS's decision and simply grant Secret Service protection to Kennedy at any time with the stroke of a pen, if he wishes to do so. Why the president won't do this courtesy for the son of Robert F. Kennedy, a man assassinated on the campaign trail in 1968, a man that Joe Biden says is his hero, is just beyond comprehension at this point. Perhaps President Biden is trying to weaken his opponent in the presidential race by draining Kennedy's campaign coffers, forcing Kennedy to pay for private security around the clock.
Presidential candidate RFK Jr. says he needs Secret Service protection. In a tweet, the Democratic presidential candidate said, "Since the assassination of my father in 1968, candidates for president are provided Secret Service protection, but not me." Okay, joining us now, former Secret Service special agent serving in the Presidential Protection Division, Mike Matranga. He's also the founder of M6 Global Defense Group. Mike, okay, is he right? Does he have a point? I mean, I know there's the letter of the law in terms of the procedures that the Secret Service follows, but there is some discretion here.
There is some discretion. I do think he does have a point. I mean, you have to consider the fact that, not only in 1968 was his father assassinated in the same position in which he's, running for right now, in the same capacity, but his uncle, who was the president of the United States. And so, if you look back at historical data, in 1981, Jesse Jackson was awarded Secret Service protection. At that time, that was the latest any candidate had been awarded Secret Service protection, and then followed by President Barack Obama, February of 2007, when he announced, and then I was actually on his detail in May 3rd, 2007, when we picked him up. Yes. And so we picked him up 18 months out. So if there's anybody that I think is a candidate, I definitely would say it would be Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, so 18 months before the election, you were on then candidate Senator Obama's protection detail. That's fascinating. Yes. Was that something that Senator Obama he welcomed? Is that something he thought was necessary?
I do. I think that there was a lot of things in place, him being the first African-American, what I believe is the true legitimate first African-American candidate. With intelligence back in 2007, 2008, driving that decision, I believe it was the right decision. I recall May 3rd, 2007, the first day that I worked the shift. I was one of the first agents assigned to him. And so I definitely think that there is some discretion, but if there's anybody who's going to be a candidate to receive this type of level of protection, it's Robert Kennedy Jr.
And we should note that Donald Trump got it early as well in 2015, as did Ben Carson. Of course, he had a moment in that race in 2015 and 2016. Of course, the African-American former surgeon at Johns Hopkins and went on to lead HUD. But there's a process in place. It's basically the Director of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Homeland Security, can consult with congressional leaders. Alejandro Mayorkas, who's in that position, says he did so, and he said in a very terse letter back to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That he made public, said, sorry, we can't do it for you. So is there going to be pushback there? Is this decision subject to politics? It would seem that it is.
I think it is subject to politics, though it should not be. The facts should speak for themselves. But what I think we're seeing here is that we're seeing an unconventional candidate in Robert Kennedy Jr. And some within the Democratic Party, to include the president, I truly feel are intimidated. And so, at any time the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security or the President of the United States can grant that permission for the Secret Service to pick up Robert F. Kennedy. They just don't want to at this point, I believe.
They don't want to. And why do you think they don't want to?
I believe that he's a threat to the president's candidacy.
I see. So you think that the president has some say in who gets covered and who doesn't, who gets protected?
He absolutely has say in who gets covered and who does not. When I was on President Obama's detail, we were covering staff members who we felt like didn't need protection. And he was the one who granted them the ability to have that protection through the United States Secret Service. It's no secret.
Well, that's certainly interesting, Michael Matranga. We thank you for your time. We're going to explore that a little bit further.
Whether you support Mr. Kennedy's campaign or not, I hope you agree that given his family history of assassinations and the escalating threats against him, that he should be entitled to Secret Service protection. And I hope that you'll sign the petition asking President Biden to dispatch a Secret Service detail immediately to Mr. Kennedy's side. That petition is at security.kennedy24.com. I'm Lori Spencer. Thanks for watching.